Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and investigate the unseen turf wars happening right in our own backyards. Have you ever wondered why a perfectly healthy plant suddenly takes a turn for the worse? Well, today we're going to uncover exactly how to crack the case. Look, we've all been there, right? You walk outside, you're admiring your garden, and then boom, you suddenly have to ask, who killed my tomato plant? Rather than just guessing why your crops or prized houseplants are failing, we are going to use an exact scientific forensic framework to find the true culprit. We're literally turning you into a botanical detective today.
All right, Section 1, the plant crime scene. Let's head straight to the scene of the crime.
So to kick off any good investigation, we gotta split our suspects right down the middle. On one side, we have abiotic factors. These are your non-living stressors. Think extreme weather, poor soil drainage, or maybe an accidental chemical drift. But on the other side, and really the absolute focus of our explainer today, we have causal pathogens. These are the living, infectious organisms, specifically fungi, bacteria, and viruses. And the thing is, they don't just happen to the plant. They actively attack and colonize it. Grasping this distinction, that is the complete bedrock of plant pathology. Moving right along to Section 2, the disease triangle. Now, what's really fascinating here is that most infectious diseases don't just happen by random chance. A causal pathogen can't just wake up and decide to wreck your garden on a whim. It actually requires a perfect storm. We call this the disease triangle, and it defines the three very specific conditions that must exist at the exact same time for an infectious plant disease to develop and spread. So, what actually makes up this perfect storm? Well, first up, you need a susceptible host. That's a vulnerable plant, either due to its own genetics or maybe environmental stress. Second, the actual causal pathogen itself, like a fungus or a bacterium, has to physically be present in the area. And third, you need a favorable environment, like high humidity, soggy soil, or even just overcrowding. The crucial takeaway here is this. If you remove just one of these three sides, say, improving airflow to tweak the environment, the pathogen's plot is completely foiled. It's an incredibly powerful way to look at preventative care. Which brings us to Section 3, signs versus symptoms. Okay, listen up, because this is a massive stumbling block for a lot of folks, but it is literally vital for our investigation. A symptom is simply the plant's reaction to being attacked. Things like wilting, yellowing, chlorosis, or sudden blights. It's really just the plant crying for help. But a sign? A sign is the physical, undeniable proof of the causal pathogen itself. It is the actual, tangible organism causing the damage, like visible spores or bacterial ooze. This illustrates it perfectly. Look at the tissue damage on the left side there, those angular, dry leaf spots. That is a symptom. It's the wound. But over on the right, that is the sign. That literal, fuzzy white body wrapping around the stem is the white mold pathogen itself in the flesh. That is the weapon hiding in plain sight. Let me tell you, finding a sign is the ultimate gotcha moment in identifying your causal pathogen. Let's flip through the mugshots in Section 4, profiling causal pathogens. First step in our lineup, we have fungi. Now, these are by far the most common horticultural pathogens. They typically show up as dry lesions with clearly defined borders, or even these concentric target rings as they systematically eat through the tissue. And notice this wild photo of cedar quin's rust. Fungi often leave highly visible signs. Just look at those vibrant, fuzzy orange spores just sitting there, waiting to be blown by the wind to their very next victim. Next on the list, we have bacteria, and they operate in a completely different way. They often show up as water-soaked leaf spots that eventually turn this tan color. But you know what their signature move is? Oozing. Notice this fire blight bacterial ooze right on an apple. Crazy fact for you, that single tiny droplet contains over 1 billion bacteria. No joke. And they don't just blow in the wind like fungal spores do. Instead, they rely on splashing rain, insects, or even your contaminated pruning shears to spread that infectious ooze to the next host. And our third major suspect category, viruses. These guys are the systemic hijackers of the plant world. Unlike fungi or bacteria that might just, attack one leaf or a single branch, viruses travel throughout the entire vascular system of the plant. They cause bizarre, twisted growth and weird mosaic color patches, mingling light green and yellow on both old and new leaves. And the scary part? Once a virus hijacks the cellular genetics of a plant, there is no curing it. The plant itself just becomes a factory for the causal pathogen. All right, let's put it all together in Section 5, the 10-step investigation. The best part? You honestly don't need a lab coat or a fancy microscope to be a plant detective. You just need to follow a few logical steps to systematically rule out suspects. The framework starts simply by taking a step back. Identify the plant, describe the problem, and figure out what's normal. From there, reviewing your cultural practices and finding the exact distribution pattern will help you knock out those false leads. Let's really zoom in on step 3 for a second, identifying what is normal. Because guys, you absolutely have to watch out for red herrings. Here's a classic example. A white pine naturally drops half of its yellowing needles every single fall. People constantly mistake this for a devastating disease. So before you go blaming a causal pathogen, make sure you don't accidentally mistake a healthy plant's completely normal seasonal behavior for a literal crime scene. Now, when you take a step back and survey the entire yard, the distribution of the damage actually tells a massive story. Uniform damage across all different types of plants, where everything suddenly just looks fried, screams abiotic issues like a flash freeze, drought, or maybe chemical drift. Whereas random damage or spreading hotspots affecting just one specific type of plant strongly indicates that a living, contagious causal pathogen is on the move. Skipping past a few of the environmental checks, we hit the physical exam in step 9. This is where you zoom in on the victim, because the exact location of the damage is basically a map left by the killer. Because causal pathogens spread progressively, fungi and bacteria usually start low down in the dampness and work their way up the canopy. Viruses, remember, are systemic, so they're going to affect both new and old growth simultaneously. And here's a fantastic pro tip. Fungal leaf spots typically cross right over the leaf's veins. But bacterial spots, they are physically blocked by the veins, creating distinct, sharp, angular streaks rather than round circles. Such a cool detail to look out for. Finally, we hit step 10, reviewing the timing. You have to ask yourself, was the damage sudden or progressive? Remember that abiotic damage happens almost all at once, kind of like a lightning strike or a sudden herbicide application. But a living causal pathogen, that takes time. It has to incubate, spread, and gradually colonize the plant over days or even weeks. So, if the damage is slowly marching across a leaf or creeping up a stem, you are absolutely dealing with a pathogen. So, armed with this entire forensic framework, you're absolutely ready to stop guessing, head out into the yard, and solve your own botanical mysteries. You now know how to spot the weapon, understand the motive, and profile the culprit. But let me leave you with this final thought. If the disease triangle requires a susceptible host, a causal pathogen, and the right environment, how many potential outbreaks are just quietly waiting in your own backyard right now, just one rainy day away from a perfect storm?